It was a crisp autumn evening when I first realized that the woods near my hometown were not as ordinary as they seemed. I had spent countless hours exploring these forests as a child, chasing after squirrels, clambering over fallen trees, and pretending to be a ranger on a mission to protect the forest. But nothing in my years of innocent adventure had prepared me for what I would encounter Bankandik and near Moanda one night when I was 17. That night, I decided to take a shortcut through the denser part of the woods, a trail that most locals avoided after dark. The stories about this section were whispered in hushed tones. Stories about shadows moving when no light could reach, and voices calling out in the middle of the night. I laughed them off when I was younger, chalking it up to superstition. But now, carrying nothing but a small flashlight and a backpack, I couldn't shake a growing unease. The air was thick, heavy with the smell of damp leaves and the faint metallic scent that sometimes precedes a storm. Every rustle, every snap of a twig beneath my feet seemed unnaturally loud. I paused and turned, expecting to see my friends behind me, but I was alone. The moon was hidden behind clouds, leaving me with only the small circle of light from my flashlight to pierce the darkness. I could hear the wind sighing through the trees, a soft moan that made me wonder if the woods themselves were alive, observing me. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that the forest was just being a forest. Yet, as I moved deeper, I began to notice something odd. The usual calls of owls and rustle of small animals were gone. It was an unnatural silence, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heartbeat thrum like a drum in your chest. That's when I first saw her. A pale figure standing in the shadows between two ancient oaks. She was tall, impossibly thin, her hair long and white, flowing like smoke in the faint light. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but as I blinked, she was still there. She didn't move like a living being. She glided, almost floating, her form shifting slightly, as though the darkness around her embraced and distorted her. My legs froze. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw the flashlight at her and hope it would make her vanish. But my body refused to obey. The longer I stared, the more surreal it became, as though the forest had transformed around her. The leaves no longer rustled naturally. The air grew colder, thicker, pressing against me from all sides. Then she spoke, though no sound reached my ears. A sensation, a thought, a warning. It was as if her presence alone carried a message I couldn't ignore. Leave now, or you may never return. My rational mind battled the fear coursing through my veins. I told myself it was a prank, someone hiding and watching. But that idea dissolved as I realized no human could move the way she did. She vanished into the blackness between the trees before I could react, leaving only a faint whisper of movement and the lingering chill on my skin. I stood there, paralyzed, waiting, hoping she wouldn't return. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. My flashlight began to flicker, the battery dying as if the forest itself was consuming the light. Panic began to seep in. I turned to retrace my steps, but the trail I had taken was gone, replaced by a twisting maze of trees that seemed unfamiliar despite having walked there countless times. Every direction looked the same, every tree a mirror of another. I shouted, my voice swallowed by the thick darkness. Nothing answered but the occasional crack of a branch somewhere deep in the shadows. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was deliberate, careful, like someone or something was following me. Adrenaline kicked in, and I ran, stumbling over roots, slipping in the mud, praying to find the edge of the forest. Then I saw it, a clearing up ahead, bathed in faint moonlight that had broken through the clouds. Relief surged through me. I sprinted toward it, but as I stepped into the open, the wind shifted, carrying a chorus of whispers. They weren't voices I could understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Warning, sorrow, anger. The air felt heavy with the presence of many unseen eyes, all focused on me. My chest tightened. I didn't dare look back. I reached the far side of the clearing and found the trail again, familiar now, leading me back to the edge of the woods. When I emerged, it was nearly dawn. The sky painted with streaks of pink and gold, but the memory of that night clung to me like a shadow. I never returned to that part of the forest, and whenever someone mentioned the haunted woods, I nodded politely, keeping my story to myself. But that experience marked the beginning of a series of events that would forever change how I view the forests around my hometown. Not long after, my friend Mark decided to test the boundaries of courage. He had heard the same stories I had dismissed as a teen and was determined to prove there was nothing to fear. One evening, he invited me to join him on a dare. A night spent camping in the same haunted section I had avoided. I was hesitant, but curiosity, perhaps foolishly, got the better of me. We set up a small campsite near the edge of the clearing I had stumbled into months before. The sun had set, and the forest was cloaked in darkness. The first few hours passed quietly. We talked, laughed, and made a small fire, the flames crackling, pushing back the oppressive gloom. Then the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of a child crying. Mark froze, mid-laugh, straining to hear. "Probably an animal," he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his unease. The cries grew louder, and then a second voice joined, a high-pitched wail, urgent and desperate. We looked at each other. Both of us knew no children were anywhere nearby. I remembered the pale figure I had seen months earlier and felt a cold knot of fear tighten in my stomach. Mark grabbed a flashlight and shone it toward the trees. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but shifting shadows. Suddenly, movement in the corner of the clearing caught my eye. A tall figure emerged, pale and indistinct, hovering just above the ground. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping drastically. The figure glided toward us, the wails growing louder, more frantic. My heart pounded. Mark dropped the flashlight, and we ran in opposite directions, screaming, the forest swallowing our cries. I stumbled through the undergrowth, branches tearing at my clothes, mud coating my shoes, until I emerged on a familiar path leading back to the main road. Mark met me there a few minutes later, pale and trembling. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Words seemed inadequate for the terror we had just faced. That night, the forest proved its power, and the warnings of the past, whispered in cautionary tales and hushed conversations, were real. From that point on, I approached the woods with a respect bordering on reverence, understanding that some places are not meant to be understood or conquered. They are to be respected, observed, and feared. And yet, the stories didn't end there. Over the years, other encounters began to surface in the area, each stranger than the last. A local hiker, Jennifer, described a night when she lost her way near the old creek that winds through the forest. She spoke of shadows that seemed to move independently, and a voice whispering her name, luring her deeper into the trees. She claimed she saw a figure watching from a distance, indistinct but undeniably human in shape, and that every attempt to escape only led her in circles, returning her to the creek she thought she had left behind. By the time she found her way out at dawn, she was convinced that the forest had eyes, and that the spirits of the woods, whatever they were, had taken a particular interest in her presence. Similarly, a group of campers recounted hearing footsteps circling their tent in the dead of night, despite there being no one outside. Every attempt to confront the source resulted in eerie silence, and the sense of being watched intensified. One camper, braver than the rest, shone a flashlight into the forest, catching only a glimpse of a white shape darting between trees, moving with impossible speed, too fast for any human or animal. They left at first light, refusing ever to return. Even local authorities acknowledged reports of unusual sounds and lights in the forest, though they never ventured deep enough to confirm anything. The lore grew, each retelling layering more fear and uncertainty onto the last, creating an invisible web that ensnared anyone who dared enter. And perhaps the most unsettling stories come from those who have lived nearby for generations, passing down tales of apparitions that appear at twilight, of voices echoing across clearings, and of figures glimpsed between the trees that vanish the moment you try to focus. Whether these experiences are supernatural or simply the product of imagination heightened by isolation and fear, no one can deny the sense of dread that the forest carries. A silent warning to those who enter. As the years have passed, the haunted woods have remained a place of fascination and fear. The stories continue to circulate, drawing curious adventurers and thrill-seekers. But few stay for long. The woods are patient and they watch. And sometimes, for those who linger too long, they reach out, reminding everyone that some places are not meant to be explored, not at night, and not alone. Not long after my own terrifying experience, a series of stories began to surface from other locals who had spent time in the forest, each account adding layers of dread to a place that already seemed alive with unseen forces. One of the most chilling came from a man named Thomas, a lifelong resident who had grown up exploring the outer edges of the forest but had never ventured deep into the heart, where shadows clung to the trees like cobwebs. Thomas recounted a night when he and his younger brother had gone camping near the old creek that curved like a silver ribbon through the dense trees. The night had been quiet at first, the kind of stillness that makes every small sound leap out at you. But then came the rustling, subtle at first, barely audible, like dry leaves brushing together. Thomas thought it was just an animal, perhaps a fox or a raccoon. Yet, as the night deepened, the rustling grew more purposeful, moving in patterns that no natural creature could replicate. He shone a flashlight toward the sound and saw nothing, but the feeling of being watched intensified, prickling the hairs on his arms and the back of his neck. Then the whispering began, low, soft, almost inaudible at first, like the wind carrying syllables that shouldn't exist in any human language. His brother froze, pointing toward the trees where faint shapes moved just beyond the reach of the flashlight. Thomas described the figures as shadow-like, humanoid in form but impossibly elongated, stretching unnaturally from the ground up into the darkness, their presence both subtle and suffocating. One of the figures stepped closer, and for a fleeting second, Thomas swore he saw glowing eyes beneath the hood of the night, piercing and calculating. Terrified, they packed up hastily and left, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Though no one, or nothing, ever emerged from the forest. He swore he would never return, and over the years, he has become a quiet guardian of warnings, cautioning anyone who dares wander too far into the forest after sundown. Similarly, a woman named Eleanor shared her experience while hiking alone near a clearing that had once been farmland decades earlier. She told of wandering off the beaten path, lured by a curiosity she couldn't quite explain, and suddenly finding herself surrounded by trees that seemed to have closed in behind her, shifting subtly as if the forest itself were moving. Eleanor described hearing soft footsteps that weren't her own, the sound of dry leaves crunching in perfect rhythm with her own heartbeat, though she was certain she was completely alone. Then came the whispers, faint and melodic, calling her name in a voice that sounded familiar, comforting even, but carrying an undercurrent of menace that made her stomach knot with fear. She followed the sound for what felt like minutes or hours. Time seemed distorted in the forest, until she stumbled into a small clearing where a figure stood waiting. Tall, ethereal, dressed in tattered white fabric that fluttered as though caught in an invisible wind. The figure didn't speak, but radiated an almost tangible sense of warning, urging her to turn back, to flee while she still could. Eleanor ran, without hesitation, not daring to look behind. And when she finally emerged at the edge of the forest, her hands were trembling and her chest heaving. Yet, the memory of that figure haunted her for weeks. Locals have long speculated that these figures are the remnants of past tragedies, spirits tied to the land by events long forgotten but never forgiven. And the consistency of descriptions across decades and independent witnesses lends an eerie weight to the folklore. Beyond individuals, entire groups have reported unsettling experiences. A scout troop once spent a weekend camping near the forest's edge, eager to prove their courage and test their survival skills. The first night passed with minor unease, strange sounds in the distance, glimpses of shadows, but it was the second night that solidified the forest's reputation. As darkness fell, the troop was awakened by cries that seemed to echo from every direction at once. A cacophony of voices calling out for help, crying, whispering secrets. Flashlights revealed nothing, and the campfire seemed to struggle against an unnatural wind that flickered the flames erratically. One of the older scouts, attempting to rationalize the fear, ventured a short distance into the darkness, only to return pale and shaken, reporting figures moving between the trees, transparent yet unmistakably human in form. The troop abandoned their site before dawn, packing in silence, each member too frightened to speak. And even weeks later, they would recount that night with a shiver, warning others never to venture into the deeper parts of the woods after sunset. Then there was the story of a man named Victor, a photographer who specialized in night landscapes. Fascinated by the forest's reputation, he decided to spend a week photographing the woods under various conditions. The first few nights were unremarkable, save for the oppressive stillness. But on the fourth night, Victor noticed anomalies in his photos. Shapes that hadn't been there when he composed the shots. Faint figures in the background that seemed to shift positions between exposures, and orbs of light that danced just beyond the reach of his camera. More disturbing, he began to hear faint whispers in his recordings when playing them back. Voices speaking in a language he did not recognize, sometimes calling his name. Victor's unease escalated, culminating in a night when he awoke in his tent to the feeling of being touched, unseen hands brushing against his arm. His camera bag shifted as though someone had handled it. He packed immediately, abandoning his project and leaving the forest behind. The images and recordings serving as both evidence and warning of forces beyond comprehension. These encounters, while varied in detail, share a common thread. The forest is patient, intelligent, and selective in its attention, choosing who to observe, who to warn, and who to terrify. Some say the spirits of those long dead wander freely. unsettled by unresolved events, while others speculate that the forest itself is a sentient entity, a living maze capable of warping time, space, and perception. It is this uncertainty, the unanswerable questions, that gives the haunted woods their enduring power. Even those who attempt to rationalize the experiences, scientists, skeptics, or hardened outdoorsmen, report an instinctive dread that compels them to leave quickly, to avoid prolonged exposure, or to heed the warnings whispered by those who have returned. Beyond personal accounts, the land itself seems to bear the scars of past horrors. Toppled and decaying structures, rusted tools, remnants of farms abandoned without explanation, grave sites long forgotten and overgrown, and trees gnarled and twisted as if shaped by some unseen hand. Each element contributes to the atmosphere, creating a sense of being watched, judged, and tested. Travelers and adventurers often report similar phenomena worldwide. But the forest near my hometown has earned its reputation through consistent accounts over generations, reinforcing the idea that some places are inherently dangerous, not in a conventional sense, but in ways that affect the mind, perception, and very sense of reality. And yet, despite the fear, the woods continue to attract those drawn by curiosity, thrill-seeking, or the desire to prove bravery. For every story of terror, there are accounts of fleeting glimpses of light, whispered words that offer guidance, and moments when the forest seems almost protective, warning travelers away from paths that could lead to unseen harm. It is this duality, threat and caution, fear and awe, that keeps the forest alive in local consciousness, its reputation passed down through whispered tales, late-night conversations, and cautious advice. Respect the woods, stay on the safe paths, and never underestimate the unseen forces that dwell among the trees. Over time, this narrative has shaped a collective understanding that the haunted forest is not merely a collection of trees and trails, but a living entity, an ecosystem that interacts with human presence in subtle and sometimes terrifying ways, testing courage, patience, and sanity. The stories are far from fiction. Each account, verified through witnesses and consistent details, paints a picture of a forest that is aware, reactive, and sometimes merciless. It is a place where curiosity and bravado are met with lessons learned through fear, and where the most important survival skill is respect for what cannot be seen, touched, or fully understood. Years after the first encounters, the forest seemed to grow in notoriety, as if feeding on the stories whispered from one generation to the next. And among the most unsettling accounts came from a small group of friends who decided to test their courage during a long weekend in late October, drawn by both the thrill of Halloween and the allure of the forest's dark reputation. They set up camp near a bend in the creek that had long been associated with strange disappearances, carrying little more than tents, sleeping bags, and a single lantern to guide their way through the shadows. The first night was eerily quiet, the wind whispering through the trees, carrying the faint, indistinct sounds of movement somewhere deep in the underbrush. But they laughed it off, attributing it to wildlife or the imagination heightened by the forest's infamous reputation. But as the night deepened, the atmosphere shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly at first, the temperature dropping unnaturally, the darkness thickening to the point where the lantern's light seemed to struggle against it, and the forest becoming impossibly silent. The usual rustling of nocturnal creatures completely absent. Then came the sound of footsteps, soft and deliberate, circling the tents, stopping whenever one of them strained to see the source. One friend, braver than the others, grabbed the lantern and walked toward the sound, only to find the trees empty, though the feeling of being observed intensified with every step, as if countless eyes were following them from the shadows. Moments later, the first figure appeared, tall, thin, and impossibly pale, gliding through the darkness without disturbing the undergrowth. And when it moved, the others could feel a chill settle over the camp, an unnatural cold that seeped into their bones. One of the friends tried to speak, asking if it was real, but no sound escaped his lips. His throat seemed to constrict under an invisible pressure. The figure paused for a moment, its head tilting as if studying them, before vanishing into the deeper shadows, leaving behind only a lingering sense of dread and the faintest whisper of movement that couldn't be traced to any earthly source. Panicked, the group huddled together, debating whether to leave immediately or wait for daylight. And just as they decided to stay put, the forest offered a second, even more terrifying sign of its power. The sound of dozens of footsteps approaching, synchronized in an almost ritualistic pattern. Yet no one appeared in sight. Every attempt to scan the trees with the lantern revealed nothing but black, impenetrable forms. The shadows of ancient oaks and maples swaying slightly in the unseen wind, and each friend felt an increasing pressure on their mind, as if the forest itself was attempting to manipulate their perception, to confuse them, to bend reality. By the time the first rays of dawn broke through the canopy, casting weak light across the campsite, the friends emerged shaken and silent, their laughter of the previous night gone, replaced by an enduring unease that would stay with them for months, perhaps years. This account is only one of many that illustrate a recurring pattern in the haunted woods. First, a subtle intrusion, small and almost ignorable. Then, a progression into a deeply personal, psychological encounter where the forest asserts itself, bending time, space, and perception, challenging the very mind of anyone who enters. The legends are not limited to the night. Several hikers have reported odd occurrences during daylight hours as well. One morning, a man named Samuel recounted walking a familiar trail he had traversed dozens of times before, only to find landmarks seemingly misplaced. Trees that had never been in certain positions, and paths that led him in circles, no matter which direction he turned. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity, and he became convinced that the forest was warping around him, guiding him subtly away from the safe exits, testing patience and endurance. When he finally stumbled out, exhausted and disoriented, he noticed the same pall of silence that he had ignored during previous hikes, an oppressive weight on the atmosphere that seemed to linger like a warning to anyone daring enough to return. Even those who attempt to study the forest scientifically report phenomena that defy logic. Magnetic compasses spinning uncontrollably, GPS devices failing to register coordinates, cameras capturing strange anomalies, and audio recordings filled with whispers, indistinct voices, and frequencies that cannot be explained by nature or technology. The haunted woods have developed a reputation as a place where conventional understanding falters, where fear is not merely emotional but cognitive, challenging reason and perception simultaneously. Local folklore adds layers to this mystery. Generations have passed down tales of a hermit who once lived deep within the forest, a man who disappeared mysteriously decades ago, leaving behind an abandoned cabin that still stands as a decaying monument to the unknown. Those who venture near the cabin at night report fleeting figures in the windows, soft murmurs that mimic human speech, and the sudden sense of being watched, even when alone. Some claim that the hermit had been a practitioner of obscure rituals, seeking to commune with forces beyond understanding, and that the forest itself became his protector, enforcing boundaries on those who dared intrude. Another story involves a young couple camping near the old creek in summer, unaware of the previous warnings. Around midnight, they reported a chilling fog rolling into their campsite, dense and unnatural, swallowing the firelight and reducing visibility to a few feet. Within the fog, they saw shapes moving, humanoid but distorted, almost liquid in form, slithering between trees and around the campsite. The couple tried to leave, but the fog seemed to rearrange itself, confusing their sense of direction until they were disoriented and terrified. Eventually, the fog lifted, and the forest appeared calm and ordinary, leaving only a sense of dread, and they both vowed never to return. Over time, even skeptical visitors have reported similar experiences, lending credibility to the forest's eerie reputation. The common elements remain consistent: figures that appear and vanish, distorted perception of time and space, whispers that mimic human voices, and a psychological presence that manipulates fear itself. The forest has also been linked to historical tragedies, adding a spectral weight to its natural dangers. Accounts reference old cemeteries hidden among the trees, sites of battles long forgotten, and structures abandoned after unexplained deaths. Visitors who stumble upon these locations report heightened paranormal activity, feelings of nausea, vertigo, and sudden chills, all aligning with the forest's pattern of selective intrusion. The cumulative effect of these stories paints a picture of a forest alive with history, memory, and supernatural presence, where curiosity and bravery are tested, and only those willing to respect the unknown survive without mental or physical harm. Some locals take precautions, marking safe paths, carrying talismans or charms, and traveling only in daylight. Yet, even these measures cannot guarantee safety. The forest seems capable of assessing intent, gauging fear, and adjusting its influence accordingly, creating encounters that are personal, unpredictable, and unforgettable. As the years continue, the forest's legend only grows, drawing thrill seekers, paranormal investigators, and unsuspecting adventurers. Some leave with stories to tell, others with memories too terrifying to recount, and a few never return at all. The haunted woods stand as a testament to the unknown, a place where reality bends, perception falters, and fear becomes both guide and predator, ensuring that those who enter remember always the power of the darkness that lives among the trees. Despite countless warnings, the forest continues to draw those tempted by curiosity, adventure, or the desire to confront fear itself. Yet every story emphasizes a single undeniable truth. The woods are alive in a way that defies logic, and they remember everyone who enters. One account that stands out is that of a teenage boy named Liam, who had grown up on the outskirts of town and had always heard whispers of the haunted forest from older kids at school. Determined to prove his bravery, he ventured in alone one evening, carrying only a backpack with minimal supplies and a flashlight whose battery had been fully charged that morning. As night fell, the woods transformed into a maze of shadows and shapes, familiar paths twisting into unrecognizable patterns, and every sound amplified in the heavy silence. Liam soon noticed a faint light flickering between the trees. Subtle at first, almost teasing him, then growing brighter as he followed it deeper into the forest. When he arrived at a small clearing, he found an old, crumbling cabin that looked abandoned yet oddly intact, with the door slightly ajar, swaying with a wind he could not feel. A chill ran down his spine as he approached, the flashlight flickering with a weak, intermittent glow. Inside, he saw what appeared to be remnants of a life long past. A dusty table, old photographs, a few scattered books, and a rocking chair that moved slightly on its own, creaking with each subtle sway. Suddenly, a cold hand seemed to brush across his shoulder, and he spun around, heart racing, to find no one there. The flashlight illuminated the cabin, revealing shadows that seemed to pulse and stretch, elongating unnaturally along the walls. The air thickened with a sense of presence, and Liam heard the faintest whispers, urgent yet incomprehensible, echoing in the small space. Panic surged, and he bolted, running through the forest, branches tearing at his clothes and face, every step disorienting him, as if the trees themselves were shifting to block his path. When he finally emerged near the edge of the forest, gasping and covered in scratches, he noticed the first hints of dawn. Yet the memory of the cabin, the shadows, and the whispers remained etched in his mind. A permanent reminder of the forest's unseen forces. Another unsettling account comes from a research team studying local wildlife and plant species. They set up cameras and audio recorders in areas previously linked to strange phenomena, attempting to capture evidence of the forest's activity. Over several nights, the cameras recorded inexplicable figures, transparent and human-shaped, moving gracefully between the trees. The audio devices captured whispers, sobs, and laughter, sometimes overlapping in patterns that seemed deliberate, as if the forest was communicating. The team reported that while daylight revealed ordinary flora and fauna, nighttime transformed the forest into an unrecognizable realm, where space and perception were warped, and fear became a tangible presence. Hikers, campers, and locals alike describe similar distortions of time and space, often realizing after hours or minutes that they are moving in circles, returning to points they were certain they had passed hours earlier. This manipulation of reality seems selective, affecting those who linger or stray too far from known paths. Even those who attempt to rationalize these events, attributing them to exhaustion, imagination, or natural phenomena, often report a persistent unease that lingers long after leaving the forest. Historical records indicate that the forest has long been a site of mystery and unexplained events. Diaries, letters, and newspaper accounts from decades past mention disappearances, strange lights, and sightings of figures that cannot be explained. Some reports reference grave sites hidden deep within the woods, marking the resting places of settlers, families, and individuals whose deaths were sudden or unexplained. Locals tell of a hermit who vanished without a trace, and a small group of children who were reportedly led into the forest by voices they could not resist, never to be seen again. The weight of history compounds the sense of unease, adding a spectral layer to an already ominous environment. Perhaps the most chilling stories involve encounters with multiple figures simultaneously. Witnesses describe the sensation of being surrounded by dozens of humanoid shapes, silent and still, watching every move. Their presence oppressive and suffocating. Occasionally, these figures are seen moving in formation, gliding between trees, appearing and vanishing in ways that defy explanation. The experience is described as both terrifying and mesmerizing, a hypnotic lure that draws the observer deeper, testing the limits of courage and sanity. Many accounts share common elements: the sudden disappearance of familiar landmarks, distorted perception of time, inexplicable cold spots, and the unmistakable feeling of being watched or followed. The forest has earned a reputation not only for its haunted history, but also for its ability to manipulate those who enter, forcing them to confront fears in ways that are intensely personal. For all its danger, the forest also inspires awe. Visitors speak of the beauty of untouched nature, the majesty of towering trees, and the serenity of hidden clearings. Yet, this beauty exists alongside menace, creating a dichotomy that amplifies fear and fascination simultaneously. Local guides emphasize respect and caution, advising against wandering alone or after dark. But they also speak of the forest's allure, the draw of experiencing a place where the veil between the ordinary and the unknown feels thin. In many ways, the forest is a living entity, shaped by the countless experiences of those who enter it. Each story, each whispered warning, and each unexplained phenomenon becomes part of its fabric, reinforcing its reputation and ensuring that curiosity is always tempered by caution. Even in modern times, with GPS, lights, and technology, visitors find themselves disoriented, devices failing, paths shifting, and shadows behaving unpredictably. The forest seems to have rules all its own, invisible yet enforceable, punishing those who overstep boundaries and rewarding those who respect its power. As night falls, the stories continue to circulate, retold in homes, around campfires, and online forums, growing richer and more terrifying with each telling. The forest's legacy is not merely a collection of ghost stories, but a complex tapestry of history, fear, and mystery that engages the imagination and challenges perception. Those who have survived encounters speak of lessons learned, respect the unknown, heed the warnings of those who came before, and understand that some places hold power beyond human comprehension. The haunted woods are a testament to the endurance of mystery, the persistence of fear, and the allure of the unknown. A place where reality bends, the mind is tested, and the darkness is always watching. For generations to come, the forest will remain, waiting for the curious, the brave, and the unprepared, silently reminding all who enter that some places are not meant to be conquered, but simply respected, observed, and feared.